Welcome to episode 3 of the Mindedness Revolution. I'm here with my partner in arms, Dr. Baron Short. Hi, Baron.
Happy to see you, Greg. Excited to go for another round today.
Me too. Last time we sort of ran through the tree of knowledge, which gives us, which we framed as an extended naturalism. Okay. An extended naturalism is an argument been put forth with John Vervaeke, and now we're binding together to make the argument together as well, that physicalism is too reductive, or at least as a term, or too ambiguous about what it means. There is a one world, but we need to frame that one world in a much clearer way, and we have the tree of knowledge to do that. So we talked a little bit about that last time. Today, what I would like to do then is walk folks through that in a easy to apply way, which we alluded to last time, called the theory of the week, the UTOK theory of the week. So if I'll just summarize what the tree of knowledge says, it says there are these 5 in nature, and doesn't include technology, but it says in nature, we can look at the nature through 5 stratified ontological layers. In other words, our theory of reality says there's these layers. The first is energy information. We can see that in the Big Bang. If we factor everything out, back time, back space, matter collapses into energy. We can also see it in the way quantum field theory works. That's quantum mechanics and how that evolved. Complicated stuff, but basically there's stuff beneath matter. That's what that says. And then, of course, there's matter, objects like rocks and planets and stars. And then there's living organisms. They emerge on planet Earth and maybe elsewhere in the universe. Out of that, there's minded animals. And then finally, there's cultured persons. So you get an energy information, matter object, living organism, minded animal, and cultured person ontology, as opposed to just physical, opposed to just the physical world. And we'll call that extended because that's going to help us understand the right vocabulary for mind consciousness, and that's going to help us give us a framework for our disciplines. It's going to give us a framework for our lives in a way that, say, the first scientific enlightenment didn't. And that's why we're talking about the mindedness revolution.
That's beautiful. Yes, Greg. So, and for our listeners, what we're hoping to do is both kind of come at it from a theoretical, conceptual, evidential perspective, but then also make sure people can tie it to meaning and experience. And so we'll go through, Greg will go through the theory of the week, but the idea that people are taking time to take in the world, right? So if you're just a physicalist, maybe you just think about physical things and forget the mind in an extreme case, or don't know how to work with it or how to include phenomenology. And so what the thought would be is that as we're thinking about this ontology that is inherent in nature, we're becoming aware of it out in the world, like when we literally look around, and we actually start to become aware of it within us as well. So more of that will be apparent.
Exactly. And we're trying to give, in what certainly I think we both agree is a very scientific statement, but it's kind of a different way of framing science. And it's framing it in terms of, science goes down and just stacks, and underneath our cells are molecules, and it says what are the physical things in the world. Actually, it's more about complexification, which is basically differentiated parts getting integrated, create wholes, and then nature has stacked these integrated parts. And we can follow that trail, and we can follow it in theory, but we can also follow it in our everyday lives. And I'd like to talk to one of the best ways to do that is what at least I think and what I found is a framework I kind of stumbled across with my partner, my newly engaged partner, my fiance now I can say, well, it happened this past week, Masya Gralia and I, who are kind of living out our lives in UTOK. We were on a walk, and it just sort of dawned on us that there's a way in which to think about the week. And it started, we sort of saw immediately, hey, we can track the 5 layers, okay, then kind of get stuck in the middle of the week, and then there's bookends, and that's going to give us 7 layers that follow a natural progression. And that then turns into the week. And actually, I have talked to several people that have knowledge about pagan rituals, the emergence of the week itself. And what we've stumbled on through UTOK actually has enormous resonance with pagan theory in terms of where and other ways in which humans kind of have encountered this. And what's fascinating to me about it for my own life, and you could, I always sort of think about time in linear and progression ways. At least that's the kind of, time, there was less time and now there's more time. And things are progressing in a particular way. Of course, that's true at one level, but it's also true that, of course, time is unbelievably cyclical. If you think about a day cycles through itself, but think about a year. And of course, the week is cyclical. Now, what happened when we made this kind of set of connections, what happened to me phenomenologically, we'll use that word and we'll keep coming back to it. In other words, my felt subjective experience of being an embodied creature in the world, was the cyclical nature of time became much more apparent to me, and the flavor of the week as it would repeat itself across months and years now, it's been about 2 years since we did, became very real for me. So I really encourage folks to think seriously about this in terms of like what it can do for them, to live in a way that sort of is a microcosm or a little fractal of the universe. So it's been actually very meaningful for us. Every morning, Mossy and I wake up and say what day it is. Okay, so if it's Friday, we say, hi, Mind Animal Day. So let me take you through the week, and then we can go. So remember the tree of knowledge, it starts kind of with the Big Bang. Well, we can think about what is that coming from? Right? It's like, well, there's a positive statement. There's things that exist. Well, if you know Hegel, or if you know a lot of other kind of angles in the world, as soon as you make a positive assertion, really, you're actually making a contrast in relationship to something, at least as a knower, and I would argue even this goes very deep. So the positive existence of something exists in contrast to something. And what is that? Well, we call that the void. Okay, the negative void. One way to think about this: if you see a white number on a page, where's the white coming from relative to the black? It's the blackness of contrast. All right. So if we're bookending existence, we have sort of energy information as the positive. What's the negative of that? Well, that's void darkness. And we saw that then as Monday. When you wake up in the morning after the midnight into Monday, that is void darkness day. We have cups, we have mugs. It's a void darkness mug. That's what it's hard to see there, but Monday, void darkness day. So that void darkness creates the contrast with existence. On the broad level, like where does it all come from, the backdrop? And I will say, in terms of what it becomes to mean to us, is awareness of the dark realities of the world too. That everything isn't peaches and cream for sure. That there's suffering, there's negativity. Newsflash, Baron, you're going to die.
Right? Yes.
Right? As far as we understand it, we are going to die, and everyone we love is going to die. That's our current understanding of the world, and that's happened for a long freaking time for people. And of course, this is a Buddhist insight. Virtually all the wisdom traditions, I would say, inform us about eschatology, and we'll be actually talking about that at some point down the road. So, void darkness. Actually, we begin the week. I actually fast and abstain from sex, drugs. I don't eat now. I just drink water and coffee. And I allow myself to feel grumpy, and recognize that there's darkness and negativity. A little belief. I believe in darkness, void, and negative events. I believe that. So that's the start. Void darkness.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Please, yeah.
Greg? So I think it's beautiful, like, trying to get, in some ways, from an evidential, scientific, holistic, humanistic perspective, getting in right relationship with reality, and then personifying it in the cyclical cycle of a week, and making Monday kind of fucking suck. Okay, I mean it. Depending on how people live their lives, Monday kind of sucks. And to actually give oneself psychologically permission to say some things suck, I die, there's darkness in the world, there's darkness within me, there's darkness around. Not necessarily to be subsumed and overwhelmed in it, but just an acknowledgement of it then keeps us from even psychologically resisting what is, right? This is a
Totally.
part of reality. We're going to own it and accept it, that it's around us, between us and within us. And you've heard me occasionally reach out to you. Thank goodness it's Void Darkness Day, so I can just if whatever is kind of sucking, just allow myself to feel that. I like the idea too of the abstinence of things, right? And that in itself has its own gift, right? We all psychologically habituate, and one of the best ways to break that habituation is take whatever you're used to away, right?
Totally.
So take food away for a day and see how it changes your relationship to food. Things
Absolutely.
like this. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And we're going to be cultivating a meta observer, right? And one of the things that the meta observer can do for you is, as your primate experiences both the joys of reality and the misery, the meta observer will extend that over time. And one of the things then you can feel, and we encourage people, I do think it's crucial to be able to accept misery and negative feelings and be in right alignment, but also to know that dip generally is then going to be contrasted. Okay, and that's going to actually bring us to the next day, Tuesday, all of a sudden. And I wake up actually really, I notice the contrast. I do drink. I have our party days. But my body adjusts on Monday. Although I go to bed hungry and hangry, I'm kind of annoyed by 8 o'clock, and like Amasi will attest, I get a little grumpy. And I'm allowing that. Monday morning, my body wakes up ready to go. Interestingly enough, okay, it's ready to eat, it's ready, and it feels the rebirth. And so Monday to Tuesday is the transformation from void darkness to birth and regeneration. It's energy information day. It says, okay, this is the substance and potential of being itself, and what can unfold, and of course within what has unfolded. So energy information, the discipline of the day is physics. We have a little mantra, I am an energy information singularity. That's going to connect to the little I-quad coin symbol about our essence. And so this is the core, the positive existence that then is going to create continuity and potential. So we can understand the concept of energy, and I would argue energy information. So all of a sudden, Tuesday, the color is white. So actually the black then gives rise to the shining white light brightness. And Tuesday starts to wake up and rebirth. And in fact, we intentionally got engaged on Tuesday to represent the diamond potential, right, of the universe across it. So that's where we were our relationship gets born, or is symbolized as an engaged birth on Tuesday. So Tuesday's Energy Information Day.
That's beautiful. And it seems to me, Gregg, as you guys are working on that week and what void means now, energy information, people are going to have a variety of practices. I mean, so for example, one of the things I might do as energy information is literally look around and see everything as energy information.
Totally.
At different levels of complexification, but that there is a ground in which it's coming from, and that everyone I know and love, and myself, is grounded in that energy information, dimension of existence. And so again, taking and trying to develop a right relationship in a naturalistic way to reality, and you're a part of reality, right? So how you include yourself and the people you love and humanity. And so,
absolutely.
I think that's a beautiful energy.
And science has really given us a pretty clear picture of this as far as I'm tracking. And of course, this is our ontology, means our understanding of reality. Reality may be somewhat different, but we have a pretty good understanding that at the condensed state, there's then a differentiation. And if you know anything about physics, which I think we should know the basics, like there's these 4 fundamental forces. There's electromagnetic radiation. That is how you see. Those are photons. And then the things that bind atoms together, that's a strong nuclear force. Then there's some interesting, what's called the weak nuclear force, things like neutrinos. Then there's gravity. Whether that's a force or not, we can get into, but we can call it those 4 fundamental forces are all collapsed initially. They get differentiated. And they also then give rise to the particles and the atoms that make us up. So you are seeing through electromagnetic radiation, and you're seeing stuff bounce off particles and atoms. And this is good reductionism. This is recognizing that we are all made up of this continuity stuff. And when you look inside of me, look inside of you, we find hydrogen and oxygen and the stuff we find in stars. And that's a miracle, and that's really cool. And the fundamental theories in physics, standard theory of elementary particle physics and general relativity, we've learned so much stuff. It's amazing. And we can connect to that.
So, and speaking of learning about stuff, I think it also is a nice placeholder to say, let me learn something about physics or more fundamental sciences today. Like some people might think we're geeking out. Maybe we are, but I think it's a beautiful thing to tap into the cultural knowledge, of humanity and say, let me learn something today about physics, right? Like, why not?
And that's one of the things the theory of the week does. It's basically, and math is actually so if you were like, okay, I'm going to be educated, I'm going to learn about, and you do, I did. I did in high school, I learned, math, right? We're going to learn arithmetic all the way up to calculus. And then you start the sciences. Many of you start with physical, introduction to physics. Then we can jump into Wednesday. The color for Wednesday is gray, and it's matter object day. And of course, we used to think this was physics, but if you follow, you get geeked out and you're like, oh my gosh, it was Newton. He thought there were just objects on an absolute field of space and time. It turns out that's not quite right. Einstein taught us this. Quantum mechanics taught us this. There's underneath stuff. So we have to actually really split out chemistry and macroscopic objects, like this and how it would drop, that sort of Newtonian stuff from the quantum. So now this gives us an understanding of jumping from physics into chemistry, where chemistry is from particles to atoms to molecules. That's the structure of matter. Of course, we can also then go across scale and large scale things like stars and rocks at a smaller scale, but still macroscopic object. So matter object day is objects, macroscopic objects, down into an atom, as opposed to quantum, up into things like planet Earth. And the sun and the solar system. So this is an opportunity to kind of think about what the classic matter object world is Wednesday, complexifying, cohering structure of what we think about as the everyday physical world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and that in right relationship to reality, one can then even in a contemplative conceptual framework, an imaginative framework, kind of consider the very, the small to the very large, all in that kind of plane of existence, right? And that here we are as human beings kind of embedded somewhere in the middle of very small and very big.
And one of the things that UTOK teaches us is that there's the aggregate, very small, that's called the scale analysis, and then complexification, which is actually a different axis, which then says, okay, what are the part-whole relations across a stack? So chemistry takes us the complexification route. They go from particles to atoms to molecules. And then the scale are things like geology, astronomy. That's like how do mass aggregate get together, and then what kind of behavior patterns form when lots of atoms get together and say form anywhere from a river on planet Earth to a solar system inside a galaxy, inside a universe. So those are the macroscopic scales. So we want to do scale by complexification. That's going to map out the various patterns of emergence. And we can do that. The physical sciences and the physical science pack all that stuff together. Amazing information that we have discovered about the way all that works. So that's Wednesday. We now gone from the void and darkness into light and then into matter and material objects. And then we get to Thursday, and your discipline, or at least the root of your discipline in medicine down into biology. We get Life-Organism Day, and the discipline is biology. Then we make the miraculous jump from these complicated macromolecules that somehow yoke themselves together over some sort of complexity building process, stick stuff together, create a little membrane around a cell, and boom, we get a whole nother assembled package that we call cells. Things like bacteria are single-celled objects. Entities, organisms. And so then we jump into Thursday. All of a sudden, the universe has life in it. And that's a miracle of life. Right.
And same way, there are many ways, right, to will keep us busy the rest of our lives, the many ways we can contemplate that, right? So, for example, one of the things I may think of on a day like that is I too am a living organism, and everyone I love and care about is a living organism at that level of the stack. And then I can look out, I'm looking now, there's like a plants I see in my house. I look outside and I see some trees. This is all part of life. And then one can even contemplate what's one's relationship to life. You are life. You're an expression of life. You can think of it even in evolutionary scale, right? That we're all intimately interconnected through the diverse evolutionary processes that allow us to be here now, and that we have a common ancestor, which is to me totally mind blowing, right? We have a common ancestor, right? You and I are, and all forms of life are genuinely related. And coming
they call
from
that
a common
Luca, last universal common ancestor. So actually, that's, to me, it's a wonderful, and the tree of life. And you can actually, that's the biological tree of life. That's a scientifically, where you can sort of factor it out back. We zoom it all back, and it's kind of like the Big Bang. That's why a lot of people think about it as a Big Bang singularity. The life singularity is Luca, and then it gives rise to the beautiful tree of life, which means we're all related. And by the way, you are all related. I mean, we're like 99% related to 96%, depending on where you calculate exactly, to chimps. We're something like 80% related to bananas. The level of the genetic, if we really get, because there's so much old school genetic architecture baked into all of us. So we're, brothers and sisters in a particular kind of way with living creatures, all with a shared last universal common ancestor. It's a beautiful thing. And then Thursday is about celebrating that layer of reality.
You mentioned the pagan parallel. I know in a former life of sorts in my 20s, I was very into Native American spirituality, and there was a lot about interconnection with the earth and all forms of life, and doing phenomenological practices to remind oneself so that it's not just a conceptual, it's like a feeling, like people can come to know their interconnection. And again, we're doing this in a naturalistic, scientifically informed way. Yeah.
But I think we can agree, certainly, that there is something about the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, and technology is not, we're not really we're separating out nature from technology. And one of the things we did with our technology is it pulled us away from nature. And at the term of scale, you may have heard the term Gaia, and whether that's loving Mother Earth as an organism, and whether that really fits a specific definition of organism isn't the point I'd like to make. That's the ultimate scale, and we are on spaceship Mother Earth, and to be a part of that and how we contribute to that over time, and whether or not we're good ancestors. Those are something that I think, without being overly stereotypical, but I really think it's true. Everything I've seen, Native Americans and many indigenous cultures get so much better than we do. And it would be something that we'd love to see us kind of get better at those type of connections. Honoring Thursday and Mother Earth and living organisms across scale, and that we're part of that is what that day is about.
Yeah, and in that enactment, I think that's where there is this capacity to be re-embodied and reconnected with that which is around us, right, in our relationship. So it's, to me, that day and taking that time can play that role to like really literally reconnect us like in an embodied feeling way, which I think on some level many of us crave, right? If we're so in our mind and so inundated in thought, something to reground us and reconnect us is a beautiful thing.
And that brings us then to the next jump, and this is a unique jump, or at least potentially, and to Friday. And of course, the Mindedness Revolution gives us this whole new concept. Friday's Mind Animal Day. And here we see this, hey, many systems don't have this realization that we should really be thinking ontologically, meaning our theory of reality, is that something happens with minded animals. They are, of course, living creatures. So they share with plants and fungi and bacteria. But a whole nother thing happens, okay? And from a UTOK vantage point, we get information processing, communication at the level of life. Genes start doing this, and the entire structure of the physiology. We can go to Michael Levin, and wow, there's all this information assembled and built, and this biointelligence. Well, what's the nervous system? Basically, it's mapping that at just a higher level that enables the plant organism to get up and move around and maps itself through the neuroinformation processing. And that's a whole nother layer then of information processing. And then animals communicate with each other. That gives another communication network. So mindedness emerges out of life through a nervous system and a complex active body, a brain, and behaving as a whole in a way that's very parallel to the way life emerges out, but we have not identified it. That's the revolution we want to specify. It's a property very much like life, this meaning of mind. You put a capital M on it if you want, and we have mindedness, the sensory motor loop, gives rise to a novel kind of functional awareness response. And boom, we have Friday, a whole nother day of the week. And that's as clear. And our disciplines, psychiatry and psychology, actually don't carve the world that way. Right? Right. You bound your stuff into medicine, and then psychology bounds itself between behavior and mind somewhere in this confusion, right? And what does it relate to only humans and animals, and where's the line? Well, this says actually animals, especially animals as they get brains and complex active bodies, gives rise to animal behavior. That's the way people talk about it. But we shouldn't just think about that as just as biology or just a description. It's really animal behavior is a unique kind of behavior, has these unique properties. It's called mindedness or minded behavior. And this is going to ground, this is the missing piece. We need to be, I was talking with my friend Faisal, and we were talking about this, and he had this cool thing. He's like, Greg, so this conversation you're having with Barron, it means we need to be reminded about mind because we're mind blind. And then seeing Friday reminds us about mindedness and allows us to see mindedness first in behavior. Okay. And then once we get it in behavior in a way that makes sense, we'll then get it in our experiences. So Friday is Mind Animal Day. The redness of Friday, red is the color, green's the color for Thursday. Red, I'm wearing that today. And when we think about mind, we get all human confused. Okay. Normally the reference is, and if you look at philosophy, it's like, oh, hey, Barron, I'm a thinking, self-aware entity that reasons, and that mind is so different. Well, that is quite different, but that's a whole nother layer. That's Culture Person Day. That gets us to Saturday. Blue is Saturday. And so we need to understand the relationship of minded animals and cultured persons. Language or propositional human language is a whole nother information processing communication network. Saturday is the day then that represents the way cultured persons come out of minded animals, very similar to the way minded animals came out of living organisms, because the novel information processing communication network. And we find ourselves on Saturday as Culture Person Day, and you're wearing blue, and that's the color for that.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. So, and I think that's a great point of we're trying to remind ourselves and our listeners to put mind back in because in general, dogs and cats and other animals are not building a declaration of independence, but that doesn't mean that we can look at and observe minded behavior. The cat jumps out of the tree and lands on its feet. That's very different. And then B, look from, right? So we could either mentally simulate what is it like for my cat to, rub against my leg, or we could actually look at before our justifications, before all our thinking, to actually just take a moment, like, what is it like to look? Or what is it like to taste? Or what is it like to touch? Like real basic things that we can also, in our cultural persons, get inundated in thought to step down a level, if you will, back into our basic experience, which also helps us feel re-embodied and reconnected with our present moment experience. And we'll be talking more about this, but people, for thousands of years have been doing practices to have people step out of the overthinking to be back here in this. And in that sense, when we can transiently go into that state, we have interestingly, some parallel type of experiences that other animals may have, right? What is it like to be like an embodied being in relation to the world, like in this agent arena without all the thought, right?
Totally.
And it can help us appreciate, we were talking a little bit about this before we started to record of like, what does it mean if there are animals are minded, and I can look at their behavior, but also I can mentally try to simulate what is it to look from. And
Right.
so then what does it mean? It plays into our ethics ultimately. Like, what does it mean if I eat minded animals or we eat minded animals? What's the right relationship to that? Is it an all or none thing? Are there certain conditions
Beautiful.
we would set on that to have, that animals can have and flourish in their own minded experience and behaviors?
Totally. So we're actually planting seeds here for the next episode, which we will transition to shortly, whereby, okay, how do we map this territory of mindedness? Okay. And if you listen carefully, we're seeing a couple of there's overt activity, what we would call animal behavior. Okay. There's the activity of the brain and nervous system, that neurocognitive activity. Then there's the point of view from, right? There's the point of view from. And then when we get into humans, there's the self-conscious narrating about all of that, both inside yourself and publicly. We're going to map all that out. We have a new framework called Map of Mind that takes this mindedness concept and then divides it up. There's 3 divisions. It gives us a new map. And that's a vocabulary we've been missing. And so in our next episode, we'll talk about that. Let's wrap up the theory of the week and then basically say, okay, well, at the culture person level, we get this talking, so this sort of mind, third dimension of mind. We'll talk about the first and second, this talking layer where we justify. And then, of course, humans get together and do this really weird thing, and they build these belief value networks, right? Mm-hmm. Capital C culture systems, large-scale systems of justification, like, hey, United States, hey, politics, hey, United States versus China, or United States versus, countries in Africa, or wherever you would go. Masi is from Brazil. What does it mean to live in a particular culture with a large-scale system of justification? The social sciences can help map that and teach us about that. Anthropology fundamentally centers on that, and sociology, the societal structures. And then finally, Sunday, so that gives us our positive energy information to material objects, to living organisms, to minded animals, to cultured persons. That's our sort of positive ontology of the stack. And then we get Sunday.
So, Greg, before you say Sunday, because the theme of trying to continue to connect, right? So from that view, a culture person day, then I can think about, like I may use that as an experience to think about people that have very similar justifications or belief frameworks that I do. And I could also think about people who perhaps have very different ones.
Right.
And it's a reminder that they still are part of the same stack, right? They're still energy, information, matter, life, mind. And then we may find great variance at the culture person level. We may still be persons. We may still be legally and politically a person or a citizen of a nation state. And we may have very different views. And then it perhaps provides a place, for diverse thinking and approaches to say, here are these approaches in nature. If we're an expression of nature that's trying out different functional fitness strategies to say, this is the right way to live and do. And suggesting, because there's a variety of options, it means there's not just one way necessarily. And in fact, we could benefit and learn from different strategies, right? And combine a little combogenesis there. So it's both a way to think about the immense diversity and difference and the underlying unity, but then also at the culture plane of existence, how might we better be good ancestors, good descendants too, in this time with our fellow humanity. So anyway,
that's so important, and let's star that, okay? Because that's a super, and we'll be getting, because one of the things we are heading toward is how to reflect on mind, okay? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, from what perspective, and what you pointed to actually was transformative in my life as I stumbled into this idea of justification. Because what it did is it highlighted for me, oh my gosh, the ways we're so different in terms of the content of our justifications. Like, I'm on this team. They share my content. That's what's true. And then that team, they're all wrong. They're false and bad, right? And that was my intuition. And I think a lot of people live that out, right? And then when you see justification, you can see the difference in content, but actually it orients us to a similarity in process. It's like, oh, I'm a justifier, Trump's a justifier, Kamala Harris is a justifier. We're all justifiers at the very least, right? And actually, that's a binding aspect on the culture person. The way we go about building these and the conclusions we arrive at, very different. But the processes, underlying processes, remarkably similar for us as cultured persons. And that's actually the way I think we can identify. It's like, oh, and come and self-reflect in me. Okay, here's my system of justification. What's your system? Rather than here's what's true. Right? That's a very different, and it binds us together in a particular way of connecting. To get meta-aware of that is a powerful thing, and I think we'll be talking about that going forward.
Absolutely.
So that then wraps us up, brings us to Sunday, and that's really a reflection day. We call this God Moon Day in terms of both God, in terms of sun. That's a reference we have, or at least in UTOK is sort of like, hey, what's above us? What shines light? What's with potential? What's source? That's the way so many different. And how do we think in a refined way, philosophically? What are we aspiring to? What are we hoping for? What orients us towards that could be better? Theology and philosophy are the disciplines of the day, and so Sunday then sort of bookends the evolution into what is our potential. Okay, and of course it's going to get us back to Monday, which is that, and no matter what that is, eventually we're dying. Okay, so you can see then this is on top of culture person. What do we aspire to? The divine, the potentiality, wisdom, transcendence, etc. How do we think about that? How do we reflect on our current knowledge? How do we transform that into wisdom? Sunday gives us that. And so now we can see the evolution of the whole week and how it grows in complexification, reaches an aspiration point, and then collapses again as a little fractal microcosm.
So Gregg, one reflective question about the God Moon Day, because I think some people can gel with that, and other people are going to say, "Whoa, you just brought God into this, buddy. Right. What are we talking about?" And so, like for me, there are different, obviously a wide range of how we could view God, but I think in part, like, so for me personally, I think of it as something transcendent and including within, right? So ontically beyond anything I actually know, but then also is imminently within us and within this. But the idea that there are different conceptualizations, and what would you maybe say for the person who just got spooked by,
right. Yeah. Lovely. So first off, the general position we're operating from is called endo-naturalism. Okay. So we're basically saying, hey, there's a new way to think about the natural world, a scientifically grounded way to think about the natural world. It's endo in the sense where we're focusing on it, trying to get it arranged. Okay. And then outside of that is an open question, exonatural. Okay. And people can then attach themselves or not to particular kinds of claims. I would argue that really faith is a way of then attaching yourself outside to an exonatural frame. So if you're a Christian, you find a connection and you see that there's faith and that all of a sudden you think you have a fundamental line. If you're, evangelical Christian, like say Jordan Hall became one, he believes he found a fundamental line to an ontology that exists outside the, but of course there's still the natural world, meaning to get that right. If you're an atheist, you think all of that is like, if you're a staunch atheist. I'm an agnostic, okay, in the sense that I don't think I know. I mean, I think we're making it up at some level or whatever it is. The idea that it sits in something grand and whatever the nature is, I'm not sure. I will say, though, that why do I use this? Because I believe in the concept of God. That's actually what we want to specify. And I mean that in two senses. One, humans believe in God, and that has real-world consequences. I don't think that's a terribly controversial statement. So I believe that people believe in God, and I think that's a really important thing. And unlike the new atheists like Sam Harris or strong atheists that says, oh, that causes people to do foolish things, inevitably, and believe and become fundamentalists, which creates problems. And I agree. To me, it's fundamentalism that really potentially creates a problem. Rigid fundamentalism, that sort of tries to transcend what's really happening and force a particular interpretation based on really a totalitarian kind of frame. That's what I would say. That's a justification system that doesn't jive. But the idea of God as orienting us toward transcendence That to me is what I believe in. And I think that we have lost that. The mechanical atheist, and I used to be pretty much a mechanical atheist kind of thing, but really the idea of God has been demonstrated to be really important. I think that if you understand mindedness and the culture of persons and the way they justify the world, it actually makes perfect sense for having a sort of an orienting star, an orienting source that we aspire to. So that, for me, the concept of God is that which you move toward when you experience the transcendent, or that which you orient toward when you look toward a transcendent wisdom.
Love it. Love it.
So.
Yeah, and so that gives, I think the beauty of that, it gives, in a sense, a metacultural whole placeholder that individuals or groups of people could interpret with where they're at and where they're going. Yeah.
Totally.
That's beautiful.
And I do think it grounds it into a real ontology that allows that kind of flexibility and truth to where we are. So, all right, that's the theory of the week. That finishes our extended naturalism. I think we've highlighted what mindedness is, and now we're going to come back next week and ground that, or next episode, and ground that into a map so we can talk about the mind in a way that's a lot clearer than just, which actually very ambiguous. But now we can then, with map of mind, we can differentiate mindedness in its territory and go from there. We'll be doing that next time.
Love it, Gregg.
All right, man.
So see you next time. We'll keep rocking and rolling. Thank you for walking us through the theory of the week. And I hope our viewers kind of see again how it ties to just the stack of scientific study, but how you can also personalize it and really enrich the meaning. And I think that to me is what ideally an examined good human being tries to sort out. Let's take things that we evidentially know and see how we tie that to our meaning making and how we live today and how we live together and how we are in right relationship with reality or not, and how to better align. So,
amen, brother. Enjoyed it.
Amen.
Thanks so much.
All right. You bet.